The next thing we're going to talk about are the types of scans and different scanning techniques we can use to look on a network and map it out and get ports, services, protocols, banners, and so forth with it. Now, there's several scanning techniques that are available to you that you can use, and really which one you use depends upon a few things. First of all, it depends upon the target you're scanning. Some targets do not respond to different types of scans. For example, Windows is not compliant fully with RFC 793, which covers the TCP/IP stack on a host, so certain scans sent to it will not respond. Some of these scans are intended really for Unix type of hosts. The other thing you might decide is the type of response you need from a host. Some scans don't get anything back, while other particular kinds of scans might get something like a reset or an ACK, which would tell you if a port is open or closed or even filtered. So a different type of scan might help you get the response you're looking for. Another thing that might affect whether you're using a particular type of scanning technique or not is whether you're going to be stealthy or noisy. Usually, if you're just going to scan your own network and you don't care if an intrusion detection system picks you up, then you might use something like a TCP full scan, which can be picked up fairly easily by IDSs. But if you're going to be stealthy and you're scanning a network that you don't want anyone to know that you're scanning, then you might use some of the more stealthy techniques. Now, TCP, ICMP, and UDP are really the three things that we use to send different types of traffic to network hosts and get different responses from each one of them. And over the next 2 or 3 sessions, we're going to look at examples of each type of scan and tell you a little bit about each type. Obviously, you need to practice each type, and you can use Nmap to do that or some of the other scanning tools out there. Nmap and just about any other tool that claims to be a scanner can be used to conduct the different types of scans, although definitely I would go with Nmap when possible. The first thing I want to tell you about is TCP scans. Now, TCP is pretty much the most commonly used protocol out there on the internet, probably because most applications use TCP in some form or another. Now, TCP as a protocol can be used to conduct several different types of scans. We have a full scan, a half scan, and so forth. And there are other different scans I'll tell you about in just a moment. Now, because TCP is connection-oriented, it has to establish a defined connection with the target host. And the way it does that is through its three-way handshake. Now, I'm not going to repeat basic network theory to you, but essentially you know that the three-way handshake is where one host sends a SYN to another host to synchronize, the other host sends a SYN-ACK back to synchronize, and then the first host sends an ACK back, and that establishes the three-way handshake. There are certain scans that can use variations of that three-way handshake to send certain kinds of traffic to a host and get different responses back. So we use the three-way handshake in TCP, obviously, not in UDP or ICMP, and there are 6 flags that we use to control different aspects of communication. There's actually more flags than that. There's 8 flags altogether, but we commonly see 6. Now, these flags basically are bits that are on or off in a TCP segment, and you could turn on all 6 at once or leave none of them on, or turn different combinations of them on and off, and the different flags would be turned on in the segment. Now, TCP also uses ports, and when we're talking about ports, we're not talking about the kind that plug into a switch. We're talking about ports like port 80, which HTTP travels through, or port 25, which SMTP uses, or port 21 for FTP. So we see these different ports used in TCP, and particularly in scanning. And one of the things we're doing in scanning is trying to determine what kind of ports, protocols, and services are open. So a lot of TCP scans will target these particular ports. In fact, they may go through a whole range of ports for a particular host. Now, here's some examples of some types of scans that you can run with TCP, and these are all available to you in Nmap. A full scan obviously will send a SYN flag first, get a SYN-ACK back, and then send an ACK finally, and that tells us that the host is alive. A SYN scan will send just a SYN flag sent in the segment. You'll get a SYN-ACK back from the host, and that tells you that the host is alive. The big difference here is you can use the type of scan to avoid IDSs because you're not sending the final ACK back, and sometimes an IDS will miss that. A Christmas scan, as it's commonly called, is a type of scan where you're turning on the fin, the urge, and the push flags. And these flags basically get sent to a host for a given port, And if the host responds with a reset, the port is closed. If it doesn't respond with anything, you know that the port is either open or filtered. An ACK scan means that the sending host just sends an ACK. You'll either get no response or a reset. If you get no response, the port is filtered, meaning there could be a firewall blocking it. And that's what really an ACK scan is used for, is to determine if there's a firewall or other kind of filtering device in the way between you and the host. If you get a reset, then the port is not filtered. You may not necessarily know whether it's open or closed, but you know that it's not filtered in that case. Now, a send-fin is a fragmented scan, and it fragments the TCP segments a little bit. And these flags, the send and the fin, are set with the segment, and you could either get a no response back from the host or a reset. And like the previous example, if you get a no response back, the port is filtered. If you get a reset back, the port is not filtered. There's also other different types of scans that we haven't really talked about, but you should experiment with. The inverse TCP flag, which is listed here. There's also an idle scan, a null scan, and some other interesting types of scans that you can craft with TCP packets. And definitely use Nmap to perform these types of scans.